She said they'd concluded my supervisor had filed the complaint to preempt questions about project oversight. He'd been responsible for final review. He'd missed the deadline. He'd blamed me to deflect accountability. She said the false complaint had created legal exposure for the firm. She said the performance warning had violated my contract. She said the role reclassification had been done without authorization. She didn't apologize. She stated facts. Then the outside counsel spoke. She said the firm was prepared to offer a settlement. It included full back pay for the difference between my actual role and the administrative classification, removal of all performance documentation from my file, a neutral reference letter, 6 months severance, a mutual non-disparagement agreement. She slid a folder across the table. I asked what happened to my supervisor. The director said personnel matters were confidential. I asked if the agency had been notified of the false complaint. The outside counsel said the firm had submitted a corrective disclosure. They'd clarified that the complaint had been filed in error based on incomplete information. I asked if my name had been cleared in that disclosure. She said yes. I opened the folder. I read every page. I asked for clarification on 3 clauses. They answered. I asked for 24 hours to review. They agreed. I took the folder home. I read it again. I compared it to my documentation. I calculated the numbers. Everything matched. The next morning, I returned to HR. I signed the agreement. The outside counsel witnessed it. The director processed the paperwork. I was walked to my desk. I was given 30 minutes to collect my personal items. An IT technician stood by to ensure I didn't access company files. I didn't need to. I already had everything. I packed my photos, my coffee mug, my external drive with my personal backup files. I left my ID badge on the desk. Security escorted me to the lobby. Professional, silent, standard procedure. I walked out into the Brisbane morning. The sun was bright. The air was warm. I'd worked there for 14 months. I'd been employed for exactly 6 more weeks after the agency verified my work. The settlement check cleared 3 days later. I deposited it. I updated my resume. I didn't list my supervisor as a reference. The story ended the way these things do. Quietly, with paperwork and signatures and processed payments. No one called to explain. No one acknowledged what had actually happened. But the agency's letter stayed in my records. The complaint stated I had submitted falsified data to a regulatory agency. The agency's response included photocopies of my original spreadsheets with every number verified. My supervisor had called them directly to report the inaccuracies 3 days before the deadline. I'm Natalie. I'd been working as a compliance analyst for 14 months. My job was converting raw research data into formatted reports for government review. The work required precision. I kept records of everything. The email from the agency arrived on a Wednesday morning. They were writing to confirm that all figures in my submission had been cross-referenced with source documentation. No discrepancies found. They thanked me for the thoroughness. Attached was the formal complaint my supervisor had filed. He'd claimed I altered numbers to hide testing failures. He'd requested a full audit of my work. He'd copied the regional director and our legal team. I opened my project folder. Every source file was timestamped. Every calculation was logged. Every email chain was saved. The agency had done exactly what I would have done. They checked. I printed the agency's email and the complaint. I placed them in a folder. I labelled it with the project code and dated it. Then I went back to work. My supervisor didn't mention the complaint. He didn't ask if I'd heard from the agency. He forwarded me a new assignment that afternoon with no subject line, just an attachment and a deadline. I opened it, reviewed the scope, started the work. 2 days passed. On Friday, he called me into his office. He asked how the Mitchell project was progressing. I told him I'd submitted the final report Tuesday. He nodded. He said the client had questions about methodology. I asked which sections. He said he'd forward the email. He never did. The following week, I wasn't included in the quarterly review meeting. My calendar invite disappeared the morning of. I checked the attendee list on the shared drive. My name had been removed. I didn't ask why. I updated my personal files. I backed up every project I'd touched in the last year. Source data, calculations, correspondence, approval chains. I organised them by date and saved them to an external drive. On Wednesday, an email arrived from HR. They were conducting routine performance documentation. They needed me to confirm my job description matched my current responsibilities. I read it twice. The attached job description listed tasks I hadn't performed in months. It omitted the regulatory compliance work entirely. It reclassified my role as administrative support. I didn't respond immediately. I opened my employment contract. I found the section on role classification. I cross-referenced it with the original job posting. I compared both to the HR document. They didn't match. I saved all 3 files together. I wrote a brief email to HR confirming receipt and noting the discrepancies. I attached my signed contract and the original posting. I asked for clarification on the classification change process. Professional, factual, no accusation. HR responded 4 days later. They said they'd review the documents and follow up. They didn't follow up. My supervisor stopped copying me on client emails. Projects I'd worked on for months were suddenly reassigned without explanation. I'd see meeting requests for discussions about my reports, but I wasn't invited. I continued working. I completed every assignment sent to me. I met every deadline. I documented every instruction. 3 weeks after the agency email, I received a written warning. It cited performance issues, missed deadlines, incomplete work, failure to communicate with clients. Every item was false. I had timestamps for every submission, email confirmations for every deadline met, correspondence logs for every client interaction. I didn't argue. I signed the warning to acknowledge receipt. I wrote, "Signature does not indicate agreement with content," next to my name. I requested a copy for my records. My supervisor handed it to me without comment. That night, I reviewed my contract again. I found the section on disciplinary procedures. It required documented coaching before formal warnings. It required employee acknowledgement of specific deficiencies. It required a remediation plan. None of that had occurred. I made notes. I didn't send them anywhere. I just kept them. The next morning, I checked my email access. 3 client folders had been removed from my permissions. I could see they existed, but I couldn't open them. I submitted a ticket to IT. I listed the folders and asked if the removal was intentional. IT responded that access changes required supervisor approval. They confirmed my supervisor had requested the restriction. I saved the ticket confirmation. A week later, my supervisor scheduled a meeting. Just the 2 of us. Conference room C, 30 minutes. I arrived early. I brought nothing except a notepad and pen. He arrived exactly on time. He sat across from me. He folded his hands on the table. He said my work quality had deteriorated significantly. He said clients were losing confidence. He said the firm couldn't afford the liability. I asked which clients had expressed concerns. He said that was confidential. I asked about the agency's verification of my last major project. He said the agency had verified the data I'd submitted, not the quality of my analysis. I didn't respond. He said he was recommending a performance improvement plan, 60 days, specific benchmarks, weekly reviews. I asked if I could see the benchmarks. He said HR would send them. The meeting ended. HR never sent the benchmarks. I continued working. My assignments became smaller. Data entry tasks, formatting documents other analysts had written, scheduling meetings I wouldn't attend. I completed everything. I tracked everything. 4 weeks after the written warning, I received an email from the regional director's office. They were conducting a routine compliance audit. They needed documentation for all regulatory submissions from the past year. I had everything. I compiled the files, source data, calculations, email approvals, agency correspondence. I included the verification letter from the agency. I included the complaint my supervisor had filed. I submitted it all through the secure portal. I kept copies. 2 days later, I received a meeting request from legal. Not HR. Legal. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. Conference room on the executive floor. The attendees list included the firm's head of legal compliance and 2 attorneys I'd never met. I accepted the invitation. I didn't tell my supervisor. Monday morning, I arrived 15 minutes early. I brought my documentation folder. I brought my contract. I brought nothing else. The head of legal compliance introduced herself. She asked me to walk through the regulatory submission process for the project my supervisor had flagged. I did. I explained the data sources, the verification protocols, the approval chain, the timeline. She asked about the complaint. I handed her the agency's response, the verification letter, the photocopies of my spreadsheets. She asked if my supervisor had discussed the complaint with me before filing it. I said no. She asked if he'd requested corrections or clarifications. I said no. She asked if I'd been given opportunity to respond. I said no. She made notes. She asked about the performance warning. I provided the warning letter. I provided my contract section on disciplinary procedures. I showed the timeline. No coaching. No remediation plan. No specific correctable deficiencies. She reviewed everything in silence. Then she asked about my current assignments. I described them. Data entry, formatting, administrative tasks. She asked if that matched my job description. I provided my contract, the original posting, the HR document that had reclassified me as administrative support. She compared them. She asked if I'd been notified of any official role change. I said no. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. She thanked me for my time. She said someone would follow up. I returned to my desk. My supervisor was waiting. He asked where I'd been. I said I had a meeting. He asked with whom. I said legal. His expression didn't change. He asked what they wanted. I said they were reviewing regulatory compliance procedures. He nodded. He walked away. That afternoon, my calendar was suddenly clear. Every meeting for the rest of the week had been cancelled. My project assignments disappeared from the shared system. I didn't receive new ones. I came in Tuesday. I checked my email. I had one message from IT. My access to the executive floor had been temporarily suspended for security updates. I stayed at my desk. I worked on internal training modules I'd been assigned months ago and never completed. Wednesday, my supervisor was out of the office. No calendar notice, no away message. Thursday, he was out again. Friday, I received a meeting request from HR. The director this time, not the coordinator who'd sent the job description email. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I accepted. On Monday, my supervisor returned. He didn't speak to me. He didn't assign new work. He spent most of the day in closed-door meetings on the executive floor. Tuesday morning, I went to HR. The director was waiting with a woman I didn't recognize. She introduced herself as outside counsel. She specialized in employment matters. The director explained that the firm had completed its compliance review. They'd identified serious procedural violations. They'd determined that I'd been subjected to retaliation following the agency's verification of my work. She said they took these matters seriously.